Hey, everybody. It is Kelly Nielsen here from Grace for Living After Loss. And on this channel, we are dedicated to all things grief, discussing what does it look like, what does it feel like, but most importantly, we share tips, tools, and resources on how to recover from loss and get back to living a life that you enjoy or love. This is part of our Loss Story series where we're just talking to different types of people who've experienced different types of loss, because we want you to know no matter what type of loss you've gone through, you're not alone. Other people can understand and relate to your loss story. And we want you to just know that you're not alone and hopefully find some hope and strength for your own healing recovery journey. I'm super excited to have Tammy Willett on our conversation today. She's going to be sharing with us what her family went through, her personal loss story, and kind of the aftermath of that, what her healing journey looks like. And for most of us too, it's not a straight path, right? There's some forwards, backwards, some detours along the way. So she's just going to share her journey with us, and so that we can glean the wisdom that she carries. So Tammy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So I know a little bit about your story, but so for the folks that are watching, why don't you share with us who it is that you lost and when and the circumstances around that?
November 25th, which was Thanksgiving night, 2010. I received a knock on the door. It was Thanksgiving night. I had left my in-laws and went home with my stepdaughter who has Down syndrome, and left my husband and his youngest. I was like, I'm going home, going to bed. I have 2 biological children and 2 bonus children. Well, I had gone home with Ashley and we were already in bed asleep. I heard a knock on the door at about 10:30, 11 o'clock. And I'm thinking, Steve's in there, he can answer the door. Well, he did, and it was a church member telling him that my daughter had been murdered. My 22-year-old daughter named Brandy, she was my firstborn. God, Brandy was pretty phenomenal. She didn't have any, we lived in a very small town. Population maybe less than 6,000. Everybody loved her and loved her boyfriend. They loved them separately, then they loved them as a couple. All I can remember of that night is my husband came in and turned the light on. And first thing I was thinking is, you are not coming in here for some loving because I just ate half a turkey. This is not happening. And I took one look at him and I knew immediately that something was wrong. Brandy has a brother who was 18 at the time and literally living on the edge. He was one of those that I always expected to get that phone call that he was in the hospital from an overdose, that he got shot, whatever. Sean was my problem child. And I said, what? I was irritated. It's almost 11 o'clock at night. I'm full and I'm going to bed. And he curled up in our bed, fetal position, and just kept rocking back and forth and saying, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't say this. And he just kept repeating that. And finally, I just grabbed him by the shirt and said, say it. Say what? He said, Brandy's been shot. And I was like, okay. And I got up and started putting my clothes on. And I said, well, take me to her. And he said, I can't. Babe, she didn't make it. She's gone. And then I can remember getting very angry. I was like, who said that? Who would tell you that? That's crazy.
Right.
He relayed that a friend of ours from church had come by and told him. And I said, where's Emily? He said, I think she's still in the driveway. I don't know that I've ever gotten out of my bedroom so fast. And not too sure what I said to her when I'm getting her out of her car, making her come back in my house. And she had relayed the message that Brandy's boyfriend, Robert, and actually today's his birthday, which is a day that I despise. So it's kind of poetic justice almost that we're here today. Instead of posting something negative on his social media pages, I'm here. So thank you. It was rough. We lived in a tiny town. Everybody loved those two separately. And then they loved them as a couple. So, and he had called a friend as they were Brandy and Robert were leaving a bar. They were fighting. There was a lot of drinking. His two nephews were there. They said, "We'll take Brandy home." And Robert said, "If you give her a ride home, I'm never effing speaking to you again."
Mm.
Truth is, he never did speak to him again. And it's as they were leaving the parking lot that night, he pulled out a gun from underneath the seat, put it to her head, and pulled the trigger. And on his way home, which was about a 16-mile drive right past the hospital, and he never stopped. He called his best friend and said, I effed up, I killed Brandy. And his best friend happened to be at a party back home. We called them pasture parties, where somebody had a big field and all the young adults would maybe make a bonfire, sit on the back of their trucks and drink beer, whatever. And he was at a party. His best friend was at a party with a lot of people, which happened to be my friend from church. Her brother was there. And her brother called her and she came straight to our house. So in that little bitty community, the second that happened, the line was drawn in the sand. There was a line in the sand and nobody was talking about the elephant in the room. It was, my husband, part of him saying, I can't say this, was because he knew that we've made a habit in our marriage, and next month will be 19 years, to not say words we can't take back.
Mm.
You can't get them back. And he knew the second that those words came out, that the woman that he had married 5 years earlier was going to be gone.
Mm.
I was going to change permanently, and nothing he could do was going to change that. And he didn't want to say it because it was something that I thought he was going to tell me something about my son.
Right.
Robert not only drove his truck into his house when he finally got home, after several calls to his best friend confessing, he drove his truck into his house with Brandy's body inside the truck, trying to take his life. That didn't work. So
Mm.
he carried Brandy's broken body in the house, laid her down, called his friend, kept talking about a cigar and a lighter. He couldn't find a lighter. Said, I need a lighter. I need a lighter to light my cigarette. Or my cigar, excuse me. And then he told his friend on the phone, he said, I'm going to go be with Brandy. He lit the house on fire, went
Wow.
right on top of my daughter, and took his own life.
Wow.
And when they finally got the fire put out, they thought they only had one body until he rolled him over. But even the first deputy on site, it was such a small town. The first officer on site was actually one of Brandy's high school boyfriends.
Mm.
Everybody in town knew that she lived there. Um, Needless to say, Thanksgiving is never the same for us. For a long time, after 2 years after Brandy's murder, my husband and I packed up. We built a home 3 hours away here in Corpus Christi, Texas. We wanted to build a home, move from renters to homeowners,
Mm.
and we should build a house. And he had an inheritance. I said, not here, not here.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
was like, where would we go? And I was like, where do we always go? Every chance we get, where's our happy place? And this is our happy place. Everywhere I look around here, I have memories of my daughter. He used to bring my two children here. It's a single mom to visit a friend. So everywhere I look, I have memories of her and her brother. So and we had 6 weeks after our house was finished to find jobs before our first mortgage was due.
Mm.
But those first 2 years that we stayed in that little bitty town, Kelly, if I'm telling you, it was horrid. He had about 8 siblings.
Mhm.
One of them was the manager of the lab at the hospital. So if I had to take Ashley to the emergency room and they had to draw blood, guess who came? We had one grocery store, and it was inevitable. It just seemed like timing, and the universe was awful. A big cruel jerk, because usually his mom was in there as well.
Yeah.
Everybody's whispering, oh my God,
Yeah. The whole
what's
town. Yeah. The whole town had to know your business.
Brandy's service when we had her memorial service, everybody, it was in the paper, the whole 9 yards. Robert, I feel bad for his family
Mm.
because they buried their son in private. It was very hush hush. It was so sad. We had 2 funeral homes in town. She was at the better one. It was horrid.
Yeah.
Um, it was bad.
Yeah. Have you have you talked to his family at all? Has there been any kind of like reconciliation between you and them or any like healing?
No, in the beginning, one of his siblings came. She was friends with Brandy,
Yeah.
and she would come to my house as she was grieving in the months immediately following. And she even went as far as to buy me a necklace with a bee on it. And it was a gift that she'd given to Brandy. And she
Mhm.
wanted me to have one just like it. And I kept telling myself that I couldn't hate Robert because you couldn't hate somebody that didn't exist.
Mhm.
That was a lie. That was
Mhm.
a lie to myself that I had to deal with 5 years later. Um, so his sister, it was more of a guilt. It felt like a guilt gift. Everybody
Mhm.
else started doing what they do to most domestic violence victims is victim blaming.
Mhm.
And I almost pitied his mom and dad because if I would have known that he cussed his mother like he did, called her the names that he called her, treated her the way he did, I would have told Brandy, if a man doesn't respect his mom, please run because he's
Yeah.
not capable of respecting you. But I didn't know these things. This was acceptable in their family,
Yeah.
completely acceptable. I liked him. I liked him a lot. I loved him. I
Yeah.
had dinner with him. I'd seen him 3 days before he killed her. I had no clue.
How
That
long
the
had they all been dating?
off and on for a year, but they'd only been living together for about 3 weeks.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The beginning of November, her roommate best friend was getting married, and they lived together forever. So Brandy moved in with Robert,
Okay.
and for 3 weeks, and we honestly believe that that night that everything happened and that she was going outside at the bar crying. She would go back, he would go get her. It's on and, in and out, lots of emotions and drama. I believe that she was telling him then that she was going
Mhm.
to move back to her dad's because her father's house was closer to her job and she had totaled her car. So at that point, it made more sense to her, but he knew. He absolutely knew that the second she moved to her dad's, she
Yeah.
wasn't going to be with me anymore because things weren't good. We just didn't know it.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit. I want to hear about two things. One, and we touched on it a little bit. I can't imagine because of the nature of the loss and living in a small town, and then coupled with the fact that everyone is just awkward and uncomfortable with grief in the first place. Like, were you like a social pariah? Like, were people just, like you said, they were whispering or clearing the way or whatever? Like, what was it like being in that town afterwards?
I was that mom that was in the church every time the doors were open.
Mhm.
And every Sunday, I was there on Sundays, Mondays, Wednesdays, Thursdays. Um, and I would go to church and how are you? And I would just go, I'm fine. I'm fine. While on the inside, I'm screaming.
Yeah,
I'm not freaking fine. There's nothing fine about this.
yeah,
It was an elephant in the room that nobody talked about. To this day, they still act like they do not have a domestic violence problem.
mm,
Grief. My own biological family didn't call me for 6 months after Brandy's murder.
wow,
I had the opportunity sorry, to ask my dad why before he passed 3 years ago. I said, Daddy, why? I need a job. He said, we didn't know what to say.
yeah,
So even my own family was so lost.
Yeah, that's unfortunately that's so common. I hear that from so many people, and I call it the loss after the loss because, and I think especially the more traumatic the circumstances, people just, like when my mom took her life and my dad was like involved with it, it was, our joke was that my life was like an episode of Dateline, like it was kind of too much. And so nobody knew what to say. And so the people that I thought would be there to support me, they just literally couldn't. It was just too big for any of us. And so I'm sure, and then it makes you feel even more alone and isolated because nobody's talking to you about it.
I was surrounded by church family and with great intentions, but nobody, if my biggest fear was if I told them how I was really doing, what would they say?
Right.
Could they really handle how I was really feeling?
Right.
And I was walking through this facade for 2 years
Wow.
of saying what everybody else expected me to say for their sake.
Yeah.
Their sake. All the while I was dying on the inside. And
So what was,
I
go
did
ahead.
try I did try to join Brady.
Mm,
And it wasn't that I wanted to die by any means, Kelly. I didn't want to hurt anymore.
yeah.
There was no support system. There was
Yeah.
no grief groups. Even my pastor didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
God has a God has a plan. Well,
Or they're in a better place.
he needed another angel. And
Or
all the
I
I
don't
could
mean
write
to
a book
laugh,
of what
but it's
not
like
to say.
it's true. That's why it's so sad. And this yours was in 2010. I lost my mom in 2017, and same. And I think actually, unfortunately, it's still the same today. That's why I'm so passionate about doing this. And I love speaking with pastors and coaching pastors and helping equip churches because as a Christian, if I go to the church and the church doesn't have help for me, what hope is there for me? And what hope is there for the world if we, the church, don't have the answers for these things? If we're not a source of hope and strength for people when they're at their life's crisis, like it's one of the most important roles that we play. I feel like the church is, we're supposed to be a place of help in these kinds of times.
Scream, to heck with God. He doesn't need her. I'm selfish. I want her with her mama.
Yeah,
You know, how would people have responded to that?
right.
And bless her heart, I had a church member that worked at the cable company and happened to be right next to the cemetery. And one day I had gone to the cemetery and I stopped by to pay my cable bill. And I walked in and she just innocently said, Tammy, how are you doing? And I lost it. And she
Mhm.
said, I wish somebody would tell me how I'm supposed to be doing because I'm not. And I
Yeah.
let it all out. Thank God that was a very tiny cable office. There was like two ladies in there. But I'm sure, being the small town that it was, everybody went, oh, this Tammy was just in here. I spiraled.
Yeah.
And my family not being there for me for 6 months and really bottling this up. I couldn't even talk to my husband.
Yeah.
He was very uncomfortable. You
Yeah.
know, I found myself angry at him because I'm a smoker,
Mhm.
and I would be sitting on our front porch smoking a cigarette, and I could hear him and his two girls playing in the living room floor, laughing, tickling. And I found
Mhm.
myself even angry at him because
Mm,
he had his two girls, and mine was never going to come up.
yeah, yeah,
It was rough.
it's so hard, and it affects a lot of relationships because men deal very differently with grief too. So it's very hard for marriages to navigate that. I want to hear about, so what was the turning point for you? So you were talking about that you spiraled and everything. What was the turning point for you?
It was after drug addiction, which was my prescription drugs, because when you have no resources, that's the only thing that's what small town doctors do is let's give you a pill for this.
Right.
And after my suicide attempt and self-destructive behaviors, once my life spiraled out of control, And I found myself in a correctional facility because of my own behaviors.
Mhm.
I'll be straight with you. I am, by all definitions, an addict and a convicted felon.
Mhm.
Although I haven't had a traffic ticket in 12 years. Uh, so I can tell somebody what not to do when grieving because I did it all.
Right.
I could not find my butt for with both hands for 2 years. Um, it was after the spiraling when I kept going to church
Yeah.
and I wasn't talking to God. I just
Yeah.
wasn't. I was going through the motions, but it was just an act.
Yeah.
Day that I was at the altar and I was singing a worship song and realized that my worship was sincere. I really did mean it. That
Mhm.
was better than the day that I found salvation. And it blows my mind to this day that the creator of the universe, my God, his shoulders were big enough to
Yes.
carry my anger at him for 2 years. 2 years. Um, I could have lost everything, including my husband. But we had been friends for 18 years before we ever got married. We'd only been married 5 years. The
Yeah.
stuff we went through in the first 5 years of marriage would have sent most couples to divorce court,
Right.
especially with no resources. But I woke
Right.
up one day and realized that losing Brandy was sad and it was awful and it was traumatic and it was complicated with or without prescription meds.
Right.
And
Right.
that's the day that I said, no, I can't medicate. You can't medicate grief away.
Right. Right.
I wanted to it's you just numb it. So I needed to face it head on. And
Yep.
that's when I first found a domestic violence organization and I shared my daughter's story. And then it became about helping others. And I've got a plethora of families, moms like myself, who have lost a daughter to domestic violence, have a sister who lost her brother. And, when I tell them, I understand,
Right.
I do. When
Yeah.
I know what you're going through, you can't learn this stuff in a book.
Right.
You sit there and
It's
just
it's
go to
it's
college.
hand to hand combat, right? It's hand to hand combat. You have to, there's some things in life you only can learn by experience. And that's why I do what I do and why I started the company. Because when my mom died, I don't want to go talk to a counselor. Like, I don't care what your book says about how, you know what I mean? Like, unless you have been in my shoes or know what this feels like your words don't carry any weight for me. But for those of us who have been through these situations, our words and our testimony are like gold for the people behind us because they need to see that life is possible on the other side, right? And I don't know about for you, it has to be the same for you that healing comes from helping other people and
Yeah.
it makes the pain not be in vain, right? Like their death is not meaningless, it's not empty, it's being used for a bigger and better purpose, right? Now you're able to help other people, and that's amazing.
And when I help somebody else or I reach out and literally, even through social media, and hold their hand while they're
Yeah,
in that good place and hold their hand and lift them up, just like somebody did for me. And
yeah,
you know, it helps. It helps each time I do it. When
yeah,
I share Brandy's story with survivors, with victims, and tell them, get out. Brandy thought she could leave tomorrow, but she didn't get it tomorrow. Please don't let your mom become me.
right,
When Brandy's life mattered.
yeah,
And the day I started reaching out to other people, and I realized that, when I said that I was mad at my husband in a group of domestic violence families who had lost someone, the first time I was in a big setting, and I said I was so mad at him because he still had his two daughters. Nobody looked at me like I was crazy.
right,
People understood, and I was like, wow, there's something to this. That retreat that I went on was life changing.
yeah,
Um, it helped me to realize that I wasn't alone and that I wasn't as crazy as
Yeah.
everybody. And even to this day, my best friend,
Mhm.
she's telling me, I didn't know how to help you then. I didn't know
Yeah.
what to say. Now, when a friend of hers or somebody we know loses someone, she knows to just show up and be there.
Yeah.
And my life mission is to educate others. Say something.
Yeah.
Don't just abandon them. Just don't shut down. How about telling them I don't know what to say?
Right.
So if you don't mind, can I sit here with you? Can I
Yeah.
just sit with you in your grief?
Yeah.
Um, every year on Thanksgiving, me and my husband and Ashley go away on what I call my no holiday holiday.
Love it. Love
We,
it.
we just started that about 3 years ago. We pack up before Thanksgiving. The first year we did it, the 25th was the day after Thanksgiving. So we pack up the day before Thanksgiving and we sneak out of town. We go
Yeah.
to this little bitty fishing community in the middle of nowhere. We stay at the same place. We take the first year we took charcuterie stuff and it
Yeah.
was fend for yourself, the three of us. And you slept when you wanted to sleep. You ate when you want to eat. And I wasn't washing anybody's dishes. And it wasn't, it's not a sad trip by any means. I wake up and watch the world wake up on November 25th, watch the sunrise. The first year was pouring down rain, so I watched the world wake up. Um, and I wrote in my journal and I just sat there. And that first year that we did this, my grief changed.
Yeah.
I scooted over on that bench and I made space for it. My grief is no longer my enemy. It's no longer a bad thing. I don't want anybody to take my grief from me because it's mine. It's the proof that I loved her that much. Sometimes I find myself getting envious. When my daddy died about 3 years ago, I was mad at him. It's like, how dare you go before me? You got
Mhm.
there. You know, a part of me is a little envious each time one of our loved ones or friends pass before me because I'm like, cheater.
Mhm.
It will be a day,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
I love, the one thing I really want to hone in on what you said is like, I love the idea and the ability to design and define it for yourself because I actually like, I think we're saying the same thing, but in a different way that like, for me, it's about grief not having control, right? Like I'm in charge. It's not in charge of me. I'm in charge, right? So I get to decide reinventing holidays or anniversaries or whatever else. And that's what we try to help people to do is to what do you want it to look like? How do you want it to show up in your life or not? How do you want to honor and remember your loved ones? What do you want holidays to look like? And to just give people the empowerment to do that, right? Like, and so I love that you have a new tradition. Honestly, Mother's Day and the Christmas holidays are just not the same for me. I don't know if they will ever will be. And I'm still trying to find, so I'm newer in my journey, right? I still have not found a Christmas tradition that feels right or something that I like doing. And actually, so my plan next year is to take a trip. I'm like, I'm just going to X out of this whole holiday thing altogether. But
break the
that's what it
rules.
is, like
Break
figuring
the
it
rules.
out. Yeah.
Make your own traditions. Her birthday just passed. November 25th, Brandy would have been 36 years old. Um, my husband didn't get up that morning, so I went to the beach and watched the sun come up. And as I'm sitting there, I was the first one on the beach at like 5:30 in the morning because Brandy was my water baby. If it was her birthday month.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but she'd have been anywhere near a body of water. So I always watch the sun come up by the water on her birthday. And I sat there and I was the only one there, and it was kind of creepy at first. But before the sun came up and I looked around me, there was trucks and people everywhere, couples,
Yeah.
you know, showing up for the same thing that I came for, is to watch the world wake up. And I was like, sat there and had my coffee, and I was like, wow, just wow. And came home, had made myself, as my husband and Ashley had already eaten, made myself an incredible breakfast.
Right.
Celebrating Brandy. Put ketchup on my eggs, even though I don't normally do that, but Brandy put ketchup on everything. Ate my breakfast. And then I turned the AC down to 60 something, covered up with a blanket, and we watched Disney movies, starting with her favorite. There was The Lion King. Then there was The Wizard of Oz. That was her all-time favorite. So we lounged for the rest of the day and
And I
just did.
guess that's like the hope that I want to, and give to people that are watching if they're earlier in their journey, is that you can celebrate them, you can remember them, you can have special traditions, and they are not always sad. They don't have to be sad things. I have inside jokes with Quentin. Like, I laugh on a regular basis about stuff with my son. And so I just want people that are watching to know that, like, over time you can create what you want it to look like, right? And you can do any number of sorts of things. I do want to ask for your, so just keeping an eye on time, if somebody's watching this video, if you could give, if somebody's in, let's just say, their first year, what piece of advice would you give them if you could go back and do it again? Or what's the thing that you wish somebody would have told you?
Take 5 seconds. Before you make a decision, literally. I mean, I made so many wrong choices because I was hurting and I had nowhere to turn.
Yeah.
Give yourself that 5 seconds to think, okay, this is how I'm feeling, and we're all allowed to feel however we're feeling.
Yeah.
But I'm feeling this way, and I'm thinking this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
But how will that affect the world around me and those people that care about me? Because you're not alone. If I
Right.
would have stopped and taken 5 seconds to think how my actions, Robert put a gun to my daughter's head and pulled the trigger, and this was my reaction.
Right.
Before I reacted, if I'd have taken that 5 seconds and thought about it, I wouldn't have struggled as much as I did.
Made some
And
different choices. Yeah.
give yourself some grace.
Yeah.
You're
100%.
allowed to feel however you're feeling. You're allowed. Whatever it is you are feeling, accept that, embrace it, and don't hide it.
Yeah.
I stuffed everything in, and then everybody was just surprised when I spiraled out of control. And
Yeah.
I was a hot mess.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. So be honest about how you're feeling. Find a safe place or a safe person or a safe something to be your true authentic self, and get help soon. Don't, I talk to people sometimes and they're like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready for recovery. It's like, well, when are you ever? We weren't ready for the loss to happen in the first place.
Oh,
You have to get to that place of facing it and doing the hard work to learn how to live again after it, right? And the more you prolong it, or the more you try to numb or run or whatever you do to avoid it, it's just going to create more problems. So absolutely, 100%.
Dang, I forgot what I was going to say.
I'm sure that this has been hugely helpful, and I want to applaud your perseverance and your strength. I want to applaud your just not giving up on yourself and not giving up on the rest of your life. And I want to applaud all the service that you've done, sharing her story and helping other families. It's amazing. And it's a testament to you and to her. And so I just thank you for your place in this world and what you bring to it.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me. Um, I hope that whoever sees this, that they will reach out to somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll put some links, especially because of this story. We'll put some domestic violence organization links in the description. So if you're, dealing with that, or if you've lost a family member, we'll have some resources available for you to be able to reach out and get some help. But,
A lot of us just like them. And grief is grief.
yeah,
It doesn't matter if you had that child in your womb, if it was a miscarriage. That's something that people just don't understand. Grief is grief. A loss is a loss. It doesn't matter how it happened. My grief is no greater than yours.
yeah,
Uh,
100%.
And people just need be real about how you really feel. Let it out. Because if you don't, it will destroy you. You know, the thing that I have problems with is people call them anniversaries, the anniversary of Brandy's death. And I had somebody tell me, well, you should just rejoice today. And it happened to be on November 25th on her angel day. I don't call it an anniversary because we celebrate anniversaries. To me,
Yeah.
here I am almost 14 years later, and it's not an anniversary. It's
Yeah.
just and
And
I said,
that's,
I
yeah,
celebrate the day he killed her. I'm never
right,
going to celebrate that
right.
day, but it's 14 years later. It's a day to remember. And I do find gratitude in the fact that I had her for the amount of time that I did.
Yeah. 100%. And those anniversary dates again, like I decided like 3 years in that I was gonna note that day. For me, it's July 8th, like has no place or power over me. I'm not gonna pay it attention. I don't do anything different that day. Like I'm not gonna, because to me, again, that's not a day I want to choose to remember. It's not a day. There's a lot of days to celebrate Quentin and remember him, and that is just not one of them. But I do know that it's a personal choice for people, and some people will, and it sounds like you had a little bit of a tradition. Some people will do traditions and make it a sweet time, and that's beautiful too. For me, it was a conscious choice that that's a day I don't want to choose to remember anymore. But just knowing, even this conversation, that that's possible, like we don't have to live in dread and fear and like let that day have this really big build up and like ruin your day. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't have to stay that way forever. You can make a different choice and learn how to do it differently. That's, I think, what we're trying to share.
For
But
11 years, I went through the motions of entertaining for Thanksgiving, regardless of if it was on November 25th or not. The
okay.
golf Thanksgiving, the first year we did that 3 years ago, November 25th was Thanksgiving
Yeah.
again. And I
Yeah.
told him, I said, honey, I can't wrap my brain around doing Thanksgiving and November 25th. I
Yeah.
can't change. It's always going to be November 25th. It's always going to be the day. And whether I want to remember it or not, it's always going to be right there, Kelly.
Yeah.
There's nothing I can do to change that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just couldn't do both. And my husband looked at me and he went, who says we have to?
Yeah. Love
And I was
that.
like, what? And I have a great husband. I
Yeah.
have
Sounds like it.
a great friend. And he gave me that space and that grace to just, well, who says we have to do that? And I was like,
I
can
love
we go?
that.
So we did. And the second year we went to New Orleans to a friend's house to his buddy. Never do that again. I prefer that day to just be quiet. It's not a sad day anymore.
Yeah.
It's not a day I would celebrate.
Yeah.
Never would celebrate the tragedy of that day, but I reflect. And there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong.
It's a day for you for sure. Yeah. But the point is you've decided and designed the day that honors you and honors her. And that's the point, right? Like, so I love that.
If I want to cry that day, I'm going to cry. If I
Yeah,
want to laugh, I'm
100%.
gonna laugh. I don't want to be around a bunch of people who are all, it feels, and no, they're not. Not
Right.
everybody's whispering, going, how's she doing? But it
Yeah.
feels that way. In the beginning, it feels like everybody's, looking at you and checking you out and seeing trying to gauge how you're doing emotionally. Um, but him giving me that option to just go away and make our new tradition.
Yeah.
Um,
That's awesome.
it's for the third time in a row we've done it, and it'll be I call it my no holiday.
Love it. I love
So
it. Well, thank you again, Tammy, so much for sharing your story with us, your strength with us, and all these little nuggets of wisdom. Again, if you're watching and you're needing some resources, we will have links below of, our Facebook group and our free resources, and then some domestic violence specific resources. But as always, we are here to cheer you on every step of the way of your grief recovery journey. Until next time.
thank you.